Welcome to this lecture on fundamentals of genetics. Today, we are diving into a truly fascinating topic called polygenic inheritance. Have you ever wondered why human height isn't just tall or short, but a smooth, continuous range? Or why skin colors blend so beautifully across a spectrum? In this session, we will uncover the genetic teamwork behind these traits. We will learn how multiple genes collaborate to build the complex physical characteristics we see in ourselves and the natural world around us. Let us get started. To begin our journey, let us think back to Gregor Mendel and his famous pea plants. If human height worked exactly like those peas, everyone in a crowd would be exactly 6 feet tall or exactly 4 feet tall, with absolutely no one in between. But when you look around in real life, you see a smooth, continuous range of heights, from very short to very tall. Why does this happen? This beautiful variety exists because most traits in real life are not controlled by just one single switch or gene. Instead, they require a more complex biological mechanism. Now that we know single genes do not tell the whole story, let us look at how these genes actually work together. Instead of a single switch, they act like a team to build the final result. Think of it like adding drops of red dye into a bucket of white paint. 1 drop makes the paint slightly pink, 2 drops make it darker, and 10 drops make it a deep, rich red. In genetics, this team effort of multiple genes adding their small effects together to create a final physical trait is exactly what we call polygenic inheritance. Building on that analogy, let us establish a formal scientific definition. In the field of genetics, polygenic inheritance is defined as the inheritance of a single phenotypic trait that is controlled by 2 or more different genes. We call these contributing genes polygenes, and they are usually located on completely different chromosomes. Unlike simple Mendelian traits, which fall into distinct categories, polygenic traits are quantitative. This means they can be measured on a continuous numerical scale. Crucially, each dominant allele from these multiple genes contributes a small, equal, and additive amount to the final physical trait of the organism. While the genetic teamwork we just discussed is foundational, it is not the only factor at play. We must also consider the world outside the DNA. The environment plays a massive role in shaping these quantitative traits. For example, a plant might have the genes to grow very tall, but without adequate sunlight or water, it will remain short. Similarly, human height and weight are heavily influenced by childhood nutrition. Therefore, the final physical appearance of an organism is always a complex combination of this internal genetic teamwork and external, outside factors like nutrition, temperature, or sunlight. Understanding this combination of genetics and environment leads us to an important question. Why does this matter in the real world? Understanding polygenic inheritance is absolutely crucial because it explains the vast majority of the natural variation we see around us. In humans, everyday traits like skin color, eye color, weight, and even susceptibility to complex diseases like diabetes are all polygenic. In agriculture, farmers and scientists rely heavily on this concept to improve crop yields, increase fruit size, or boost milk production in dairy cows. It is the fundamental biological mechanism that ensures diversity and survival. Now that we understand the real-world importance, let us look at how geneticists predict the outcomes of these complex crosses mathematically. This formula helps us determine the number of distinct phenotypic classes, which simply means the number of different physical categories or shades that will appear in the offspring. The formula is C equals 2 times N plus 1. Here, C represents the total number of distinct phenotypic classes. The symbol N represents the number of polygenes, or gene pairs, controlling the trait. The number 2 accounts for the 2 alleles present in each gene pair. And we add 1 to account for the completely recessive baseline phenotype that has no dominant contributing alleles. As the number of genes increases, the number of classes increases dramatically. Before we move on to more complex ideas, let us see this formula in action with a concrete example. In a classic genetics experiment, scientist Herman Nilsson Ailey crossed pure-breeding dark red wheat plants with pure-breeding white wheat plants. He discovered that wheat kernel color is controlled by exactly 2 gene pairs. We are asked to find the number of different color classes in the second generation. We know our given value is N equals 2. We substitute this directly into our formula. C equals 2 times N plus 1. Multiplying 2 by 2 gives 4, and adding 1 gives a final result of 5. Physically, this means there will be exactly 5 distinct shades of wheat kernels, ranging from dark red all the way down to pure white. Having calculated the number of classes, we often want to know how likely it is to get an offspring at the very edges of that spectrum. This brings us to our second formula, which calculates the probability of an extreme phenotype. An extreme phenotype means the offspring looks exactly like one of the original pure breeding parents, having either all dominant or all recessive alleles. The formula is P equals 1/4 raised to the power of N. Here, P stands for the probability of an extreme phenotype. The symbol N, once again, represents the total number of gene pairs. The fraction 1/4 comes from the basic Mendelian probability of getting a completely homozygous trait from a single gene cross. As N increases, this probability decreases significantly. Let us apply this new formula to our previous wheat experiment. We need to find the exact fraction of offspring in the second generation that will be pure white. Pure white is considered an extreme phenotype because it contains absolutely 0 dominant alleles for red color. We know the number of genes involved is still 2. We simply plug the value of 2 into the exponent of our probability fraction, raising 1/4 to the second power. Squaring the fraction gives us a final result of 1/16. Physically, this means that out of every 16 plants, only 1 single plant will have the extreme pure white kernels, showing just how rare these extreme ends of the spectrum truly are. Now that we have successfully used these formulas for plants, let us apply them to a human example. Imagine a simplified hypothetical scenario where human height is controlled by 3 separate polygenes. A very tall pure-breeding person has children with a very short pure-breeding person. We want to determine how many different height categories will exist in their grandchildren's generation. Our given value for the number of genes is 3. We substitute N equals 3 into our phenotypic class formula. Multiplying 2 by 3 gives 6, and adding 1 gives a final answer of 7. This means there will be 7 distinct height categories. This clearly shows that adding just 1 more gene creates a much smoother and wider spectrum of heights. Following up on that height calculation, let us find out how rare the extremes become when more genes are involved. We want to know the chances of a grandchild being as extremely short as the original short grandparent. We use our probability formula and plug in N equals 3. We raise 1/4 to the power of 3. This mathematical step results in a final fraction of 1/64. This beautifully illustrates a core rule of polygenic inheritance. As the number of genes increases, the chance of inheriting all recessive alleles drops drastically. This is exactly why extremely short or extremely tall people are much rarer in a population than people of average height. To visualize everything we have calculated so far, let us look at this graph. What you are seeing is the classic bell curve of polygenic traits. On the horizontal axis, we have the phenotypic variation, such as height or skin color, ranging from short or light on the left to tall or dark on the right. On the vertical axis, we have the number of individuals in a population. Notice the shape of the blue curve. The highest point is right in the middle, showing that average phenotypes are the most common. As you move toward the tails on either the far left or the far right, the curve drops close to zero. This perfectly illustrates what our formulas just proved. Extreme phenotypes are very rare, while the additive effects of multiple genes push most individuals toward the average center. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us summarize the most important ideas. First, remember that polygenic inheritance is the beautiful genetic teamwork where multiple genes add their small effects together to build a final physical characteristic. Second, this teamwork creates continuous variation, forming a smooth bell curve rather than distinct separate categories. Third, we learned mathematically that as more genes get involved, the number of phenotypic classes increases, and extreme phenotypes become incredibly rare. Finally, never forget that genetics is only half the story. The environment always plays a massive role in shaping the final outcome. You now have a solid understanding of how complex traits are inherited. Great job today.